CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello and welcome to The Agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. Last week on The Agenda, we concluded that the financial colossus known as the Square Mile, or City of London, would easily survive Brexit. In fact, with the growth in fintech, it's likely to grow. But what about Brexit's impact on the UK economy as a whole, and how would the UK leaving affect the European Union? Those questions were then interrupted by the continuing drama in the House of Commons. Brexit's off. The election's on. Boris says it's time to put it to the people.
We are left with no choice but to go to the country to break free from this impasse and to allow us all to submit, as we must, in all humility, to the judgment of the electorate.
Plus, we go to Parliament in Brussels for the European perspective to hear what MEPs there are saying.
No one needed Brexit.
We voted to leave the EU. Simple as that.
And is the brush mightier than the sword? Why, Brexit is the gift that keeps on giving, at least for cartoonists. But first, the Brexit saga continues. It took a new twist this week when a general election was called. In 6 weeks' time, Britain will go to the polls for what could be the most volatile, acrimonious and critical election for a generation. At stake is Britain's future relationship with the European Union, as important as that may well be. Voters will also have the chance to choose between two main parties that have arguably never had more contrasting visions for the future of the country. It'll affect what kind of country the UK looks like in a decade's time. It could also determine whether or not there is a United Kingdom after all. The stakes have never been higher, and many politicians won't perhaps be looking forward to Christmas. To untangle all of this, I'm joined by the Guardian columnist and broadcaster Dawn Foster and the regional UKIP chairman Freddie Thatcher. Labour seemed to want, or said they wanted, a second referendum. Have they got it in the form of a general election?
I don't think so. I think Labour really want to get a majority. If they can't get a majority, they want a coalition with opposition parties. Then they want to negotiate a softer Brexit and then put that to the people. So you know, rather than come back to Parliament with a deal and pass it there, they want to turn to the public and say, you can have this type of Brexit, or you can remain. So that's the second referendum that Labour want. And to get that, they have to get a majority.
Freddie, is this the end of UKIP, this election? Because you are now basically overshadowed totally by the Brexit party. So what will UKIP's position be? Who will your allies be this time round?
Our natural allies are, of course, the Brexit party and the Conservatives. But the demise of UKIP has been prophesied many, many times, and each time it has failed to turn out. We have a resilient base of supporters who are determined to get out with a real Brexit. We don't go with this hard and soft. There's only a real Brexit. A Brexit that keeps us free and allows Britain to meet the 6 tests which we've put for a real Brexit, which basically is repatriation of powers to Westminster.
Dawn, some observers say the Labour vote is split, it's divided. Who's going to make hay while the sun shines for that vote?
I think it's very important to look at the European elections, because normally the European elections have completely different results to general elections.
That's right.
Labour in 2017 were 24 points behind the Conservatives, and by the end they were almost neck and neck. So, you know, Labour always do very, very well campaigning. Jeremy Corbyn is in his element when he's campaigning rather than just standing in Parliament. So I think that they will get a lot of people in. 90,000 young people registered to vote yesterday. So the youth vote is rising massively, and I think Labour will try and get that youth vote. And I think the problem is that the Lib Dems are really trying to eat into the Labour vote, but it's very obvious that their policies change very, very quickly, and people remember that they were in coalition with the Conservatives and don't trust them.
What changed Jeremy Corbyn's mind, do you think, about holding the election? Because about 6 hours before he said yes, his shadow trade secretary was going around saying, no, we don't believe in an election.
Jeremy Corbyn had said that he wanted a general election once Brexit was once a no-deal Brexit was off the table, and I think Labour. I think the plan initially was to vote against it to tell Boris Johnson that he couldn't simply turn around and demand people follow him. So I think they wanted to defeat him in the House of Commons the first time, and once they had the assurances, they were happy to vote for a general election. And the Lib Dems abstained on that, which was very peculiar.
Freddie, Labour says, or it has the Brexit Party in the headlights. It's going to target Brexit, the Brexit Party, and say we shouldn't be leaving the European Union. How would UKIP react to that?
UKIP is proactive rather than reactive. Labour Party may try and spin this in the north. I think they'll come a cropper, to be perfectly honest. It is very clear here that, in fact, Labour has agreed, answering your earlier question to my colleague here, the reason that Jeremy Corbyn switched is simply because Jeremy Corbyn's advisors, who I trust are wiser than he is, perhaps not saying much, they have told him that the Lib Dems are closing the gap, and that's what the opinion polls do. I do numbers, the opinion polls show this. In fact, currently is an excellent time for the Conservatives to have agreed to a general election, because the gap between Labour and the Liberal Democrats is at an almost all-time low. They will split the vote under first past the post. That is, if indeed the average voter understands what Labour's policies are. I certainly don't. The policies of the leader and the policies of the Parliamentary Party and the policies of its electorate seem to differ quite widely, and they change.
Dawn, just before I come back to you on that, I want to pursue that point you're saying ahead in the polls, but the polls have been wrong consistently. So who believes? I mean, the old expression, lies, damn lies and statistics. And that seems to be sort of evident this time round as well. The whole point is, nobody knows.
With that, I completely agree. However, there's a likely margin of error. And for polls to get it wrong outside their margin of error, 95% confidence levels, is actually quite rare. Over here, the trend is what we look at, not any particular poll which we cherry pick for this purpose. But we look at the polar polls, for example, and there is a trend, and the Lib Dems seem to be closing in on Labour. And after all, they are the only true Remain party. Who knows what the Labour Party stands for? UKIP's position is utterly unambiguous as well, like the Lib Dems. Everyone knows what UKIP stands for, and that is a strong and real and quick Brexit.
That's a fair comment, isn't it, John? Increasing numbers of people are saying, what does Labour stand for? Is it to leave or to stay?
Labour are a Remain party. They've said that consistently. I think it's really...
Well, Jeremy Corbyn hasn't said that consistently, has he?
So the policy for Labour is to negotiate a soft Brexit and put it back to the people, hoping that the people vote for Remain. It's been very difficult for Labour because a small number of MPs have very, very high leave votes in their constituencies. So what Jeremy Corbyn has done is say, as a party, we want to keep everybody happy. We want to remain, but we also appreciate that a lot of our voters want to leave, which is why they want
Which is a problem for Labour.
Yeah, it is, and that's why they want to negotiate a softer Brexit and put it back to the people, so that the people can either choose that Brexit or they can choose to remain. And after that, I think it's very important that people have a say on any Brexit deal. When they voted to leave, nobody really knew exactly what they were voting for. Some people wanted a softer Brexit. Some people wanted to crash out with no deal. And I think it's really important that the people have a say on what happens.
All right. And Freddie, the anger that's out there, how can you contribute to turning the argument down?
Well, hopefully by doing better than my colleague at The Guardian, who has just used the words crashing out while complaining about words like surrender treaty. Now, that does seem a little bit hypocritical to me, because that is inflaming the situation. What has happened is essentially this. We have a country which has voted by a majority of 1.27 million to leave. In the largest vote for a single outcome, that was leaving, ever held in the United Kingdom. Hang on.
Well, we know the result of the referendum.
Yes,
I just wanted to ask you what you could do to actually tone the argument down.
By bringing facts out. The majority of regions and the majority of constituencies for both major parties the seats that they held, are in favour of leaving. Unfortunately, we have a Remainer Parliament filled with MPs. Maybe 480 of them are committed Remainers who have done their best over the last 3.5 years to sabotage the verdict of the people. And they are the contributories to this problem. They need to be cleared out in a general election, as simple as that.
Well, we are having a general election, and it's also the beginning of the pantomime season. Thank you both, Freddie Barcher and Dawn Foster. Thank you both very much.
Do remember that without UKIP, there would have been no referendum, and probably not this general election either.
Thank you, Freddie.
Thank you.
Looking forward to what will be a long and an arduous political campaign. Well, coming up on the agenda after the break...
There's a kind of explosive element to humour that I love. It's when something, it's an idea is so stupid, it just makes you laugh out loud. And Brexit's been full of that.
CGTN Europe.
Welcome back to the agenda. I'm Stephen Cole. The rows over Brexit have provoked mainly emotional reactions, but here on the agenda, we like facts. So before we speak to our guests in Brussels, let's take a look at where those MEPs work. The facts and the figures of political Europe. There have been many twists, turns, delays to Brexit. So far, all the talk in Brussels, though, has focused on Britain's future relationship, possible relationship with the EU, and whether or not a deal could be on the table. So while the negotiators ponder the uncertainties, the leader of the Brexit party in Brussels, British MEP Nathan Gill, is sceptical that anything at all has been achieved in the past 3 years of talks.
It's Brexit in name only. So it allows the Prime Minister to be able to say to the people, this was the people versus Parliament, and I stood on the side of the people, and I was your champion, and I stood up against the EU and against Parliament, and through thick and thin, I've got you, Brexit, and we've left the EU. But when it comes to doing trade deals, taking back our fisheries, stop paying the EU $1 billion a month, all of these things that we thought we were voting for actually will still be stuck under the auspices of the ECJ. We will still have to take rules and we'll have no say in making them. What kind of a deal is that?
Remainers contend that nobody knew what they were voting for during the referendum 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's very, it's a way of really upsetting and annoying people by telling them that you was thick, you didn't have a university degree, therefore that's why you voted to leave, and you didn't even know what you were voting for in any case. And they're actually saying that to people, to their faces, and they seem to think that somehow that's going to make them change their minds, and it's not. Of course people knew what they were voting for because it was on the ballot paper. It said very clearly, remain a member of the EU or leave the EU. We voted to leave the EU. Simple as that.
Remainers also contend that leaving the European Union, the largest trading bloc in the world, will severely damage the United Kingdom, the economy and the state.
This trading bloc that is in recession and is heading full pelt to, a massive recession, and the euro is in danger of collapsing, the banks in Italy are in free fall. Why would we want to shackle ourselves to this trading bloc when there are only 27 nations out of 200 nations in the entire world? And what we said and what we explained to people during the referendum was, by leaving the customs union, we will then be able to make trade deals with the entire world and trade as we wish, freely, with the Commonwealth, with China, with all of these nations that right now we are relying on this place here telling us how we trade with them.
To misquote an American president, it's better to be looking outside the tent from within than looking inside the tent from outside, isn't it? Therefore, if you were still in Brussels, if Britain was still part of the European Union, the United Kingdom could try and reform the European Union.
So that is the line that every single Prime Minister since 1973, when we joined the then EEC, the Economic Community, has said to the British people. We will go there and we will change it from within. We all know that it's imperfect. We all know that there's problems with the European Union. We all sigh with heavy hearts at the nonsense that they bring out and the way that they've changed our nation beyond all recognition. But we can go there and we can change it from within. And not one of them, not one has been able to do that. The most successful was Margaret Thatcher when she at least got our rebate back. But the rest of them have gone there. I mean, look, we actually could have avoided the referendum. We would have lost the referendum if Cameron, when he came here to renegotiate our deal with the EU, had just been given a few little things. If they had just said to him, okay, we're going to stop uncontrolled immigration, or a few of these little things, they would have saved the whole heartache for them of us Brexiting. But they wouldn't even do that. They will not change the course of this union, which is to create an EU superstate where sovereignty is taken away from all of the member states and it's all held in the hands of 28 unelected commissioners.
Bill Newton-Dunn, you're father of the House here in Brussels. It's fair to say you are a committed European. You've served 7 terms as a member of the European Parliament. What's your reaction to what is going on at the moment as Michel Barnier works a draft agreement for the UK to leave?
Well, great dismay that the project of bringing the previously warring nations of Europe together to live in peace and work together and stand up to the superpowers in other parts of the world could unravel, because if Britain leaves, other member states might say, well, we're going our own way too. So this is a very distressing moment.
What other states do you think might decide to leave as well? Because surely the EU has taught Britain a tough lesson in saying, you can't leave, and it's taken you 3 years to get even a draft agreement.
That's certainly true, but one could name countries, Poland, Hungary, for example, who create difficulties for the other member states, but it may be they're just playing a clever game, getting the maximum concessions, but wanting to stay in the family. And it's certainly true that I'm not aware of any other serious political party right across Europe that actually says we want to leave. So maybe Britain's the only one.
27 members after Britain leaves. Is that still a unified trading bloc, or are there fissures in that bloc, especially between North and South Europe?
Yeah, and between East and West you could as well. There are fissures. nobody can foretell the future. Wouldn't that be nice if we could? But there is a central core of the member states who say we want to build a federal Europe, a United States of Europe. And the USA took a couple of hundred years to get where it is today. So it will take time for whether the federal drive, France, Italy, Germany, the 3 Benelux countries, the original 6, succeed in that drive. We just don't know. It's part of the exciting project of we're creating the future.
And emotionally, how do you feel as a committed European, a British European?
I feel partly, as you said, this is my 7th term, but I clearly have failed, even in my own region, to persuade the public that being in Europe is a good idea. The country is enormously divided. So distress, disappointment, but actually full of hope, because the British Liberal Democrats say we're going to cancel Brexit if we win power at the next general election. We're staying.
France has 74 MEPs at the European Parliament. Some feel frustrated with Britain's decision. Others believe France has its own difficulties with the EU and may even follow the UK's lead. I asked one of the youngest MEPs in Brussels, Manon Aubry, whether Brexit will lead to reform in the EU.
Hopefully, yes. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the Commission, has announced a conference for the future of Europe. We're yet to see exactly what will be in there, but we're looking forward to institutional change. For example, that the EU becomes more democratic with a right of initiative for MEPs, because we're the only democracy of the world where we, as people elected by citizens, we can't actually initiate directives, can't initiate laws. So that's incredible. If you explain this to any other democracy in the world, they won't believe it. So it's part of the institutional change that we should aim for. And we'll see whether we actually get there, but that's what we'll be pushing for as the left group within the parliament. And hopefully they will, at the end, really question themselves.
Is this an opportunity for President Macron to take centre stage, do you think, with one of the biggest players leaving, and perhaps we see the end of Angela Merkel's career?
Well, I think the ones who would thought that Emmanuel Macron would take a central role, they might review the position after his candidate, Sylvie Goulard, for the Commission has actually been voted down, which is, first time in the history of the European Parliament.
Very rare.
It's very rare, and she's been voted on by a very, very, very large majority. And first, it's showing that there's a problem of ethics within our house here, and Sylvie Goulard was being paid more than 10,000 euros a month when she was an MEP. That's a type of practice we don't accept, and that's good news. But I think part of it was also telling Emmanuel Macron that you cannot impose a candidate to us, and if we deem that actually she's not fit for office, well, she's not, even though you're Emmanuel Macron, the president of France. So I'm not quite sure it can actually get such a central role after that event.
Well, that's the view from a French MEP, but is it the thinking in Southern Europe? I asked the Croatian MEP, Georgijana Zovko, what the impact would be on the EU of the UK leaving.
European Union will not suffer greatly. It will suffer emotionally, because UK has made the history of European Union, and this is a more emotional impact on the continent.
You see it as an emotional impact more than an economic or political change?
A political change, no, because the whole Brexit made the European Union stronger as opposed to weakening it.
So you needed Brexit to make the EU stronger?
No one needed Brexit.
But that's what you said, wasn't it?
No, but I said that it has made European Union stronger in a sense that all these other, all these other currencies.
How has it made it stronger?
Because people have felt and have seen on the first hand how messy this divorce is.
So it's frightened people off, is that what
absolutely.
But that's not very constructive. People are too frightened to go through a Brexit.
No, No, but it's nonsense.
That was the intention, was it by Brussels?
It was not the intention by Brussels. It was the fake news that made all this mess of referendum and fake propaganda on the impact of Brussels on the daily life of European citizens, including UK citizens. Real, because since Brexit we have learned how communications are needed, and that people should learn, our citizens were not informed about how much their life has changed for the better by being European citizens.
The View from Croatia, France and Brussels, all speculating on what comes next. And that is still uncertain. But what is certain is that journalists, leader writers, opinion formers, even cartoonists have all had great fun following this Brexit saga. Steve Bell is one of the most famous cartoonists in the United Kingdom, and his political caricatures have certainly had a major impact on some political careers.
It's been going on for years and it's been tedious right from the start. That's actually not a bad thing in cartooning. Sometimes if you've got a boring subject you can liven it up. But this one's gone on for so long it is starting to drive everybody mad, including us cartoonists. But there's no sort of shortage of subjects and characters and situations to plunder, as it were. You've had the tragic story of Theresa May, who failed to bring it through, and she was like a sort of walking zombie. And then she fell off her perch completely and was replaced by this new bumptious force of Boris Johnson, who's a ridiculous character in many ways. The idea is to turn politicians into comic characters. And because it's comic, you're using humour. I mean, humour is not always funny, and you're using things like bitter irony, very black, dark irony as well. You're trying to get a point across. You're trying to disturb people's points of view to get them to see things as I do. But there's a kind of explosive element to humour that I love. It's when something, it's an idea is so stupid, it just makes you laugh out loud. And Brexit's been full of that. It's been full of such stupid situations. It's very, very important that we get under that, and start undoing what they're trying to do, just to show what's really going on. And that's where cartoons come into their own. And a cartoon can do it in a way that no other medium can.
That was Steve Bell, Guardian cartoonist and political commentator. Now, this was supposed to be the week that Britain left the European Union, but it has turned out to be another week, another missed Brexit deadline. Boris Johnson came tantalisingly close, but eventually he conceded that Britain wouldn't be leaving the European Union on the 31st of October. So instead of spending the next few months in the ditch that he said he would end up in if Brexit was delayed, the Prime Minister wants to spend them on the campaign trail. EU leaders agreed to a flex tension until next year. So 3 years on from that fateful referendum, we may be heading towards a defining moment. Not Brexit, but another general election. Boris Johnson wants to go to the country and ask voters to give him what they didn't give Theresa May, a big enough majority to deliver Brexit. He hopes that majority would make the process easier by giving the Tories enough of a majority to withstand rebellions from the extremes of both wings of the party. He then wants to, post-Brexit, build a future not determined solely by the relationship with Europe. Well, whatever happens in that election, hard negotiations on transition, trade, security and more will take up most of the next few years. As one pessimistic Remainer said, what really lies ahead is Brexiternity. And that's all from the agenda this week. Next week, the agenda team will get as far away as it's possible to get from Brexit as we take off into space. And we'll be asking who can afford to travel to the final frontier? And when they get there, who owns what? And that's all to come next week. But don't forget, for more agenda content, you can visit our website, or you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. But for now, from me, Stephen Cole, and all the agenda team here in London, it's goodbye.